Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on next generation remote uh, presence. And we have our world famous speaker, Professor Rob and Professor David Smith. First, I want to give chance Professor David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you. This is a great topic because it's one that's beginning to push the edge of the envelope in so many different ways. Uh, Remote presence is just really the immersive experience of a real place, including real-time remote interaction with the people there. Uh, and as you begin to look at it, you can break it down pretty simple. The immersion experience typically involves a VR or an AR headset, allowing the user to look around as though they were actually in a place. Or it could use an immersive cave where that's an environment set up with projectors and things around the outside where you actually walk through it and are part of that experience. The second part is the capture of a real place using data from many different sources, but it's the visual data, the sound data, other sensor information, such a way that the real world space can be shown in an immersive manner. And it's real time remote interaction, allowing users from far away to capture the place to communicate directly with the people there. And you're seeing this begin to use in many different places and some very early applications. Um, yeah, in remote presence, as you look at it, it's been difficult to achieve all those three things: the immersive experience, the capture of the real place, and particularly the real-time remote interaction uh, as you get there. And today, the initial implementation typically costs thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars and requires some really technical things, but that cost is falling very rapidly. And remote presence is feasible now, at least in some of the ways it can be implemented. Uh, my first experience with an immersive experience was I helped build some immersive caves to, for example, for a couple of the big oil companies, be able to walk through the data of an oil field underground and begin to see the nuances of where they should drill, how much is there, and things. And we did immersive experiences um, inside the intelligence community to look at various areas of interest that they wanted to get really more in-depth experience with. And the newest thing as you begin to look there, and I find this one very exciting, is as we begin to look particularly how the metaverse and immersive experiences are coming together with each other. You're seeing a lot of that as it begins to take this remote presence and push it further. Um, the ability to go and attend a trade show as remote presence is a very interesting excitement, particularly since that many of the trade shows are suffering right now. We're beginning to see the ability to do a remote presence at concerts and having those set up in some very interesting ways. And again, numerous applications, but really the falling cost of VR, AR headsets is dramatically helping here. Our ability to integrate all the different data sources and creating a synthetic environment is dramatically helping the sources here. And of course, the fact that everything's digital and we have ready access to very high bandwidth networks is really helping push this forward too. So at a high level, that's kind of what it is.
Thank you, Professor Rob.
Well, starting back in history, I started working with telepresence, which is really the common term for remote presence, in the early 2000s. I was brought in on a project for Sony. They were working on a headset targeting the medical profession. One of the early areas where telepresence opened up was in medicine, because often doctors couldn't be where the patient was, and it was not safe for the patient to fly or carry the patient to wherever the operation had to occur. So you'd have a surgeon in place, and then you'd have a remote expert advising the surgeon on how to proceed with the operation. Typically, fringe cases that required a specialist. And they sent me a headset, which at the time cost, I think, it was about $21,000. Not HD, it was low res, but you could also do a bunch of other stuff with a headset, which was at least fun for me. You could watch movies and you can play video games. I ended up taking the headset over to a LAN party that was adjacent to one of the conferences I was at. It was a huge hit at the LAN party, but you could see where the shortcomings were. First, $21,000 wasn't going to work for anybody, and except professionals. And the other is the resolution and latency involved in the technology did throw off game playing, and undoubtedly had issues with telepresence. Because when you're solving a telepresence problem, you're as David pointed out, you're really trying to place the remote individual into the remote location. And there have been a number of technologies that have come forward to do that. The most advanced is probably Microsoft's HoloLens, which was developed in conjunction with the Lawrence Livermore labs and initially used to help explore Mars. What happened is they would send the rover out. The rover would scan the Martian landscape, and then HoloLens would render that landscape virtually, and the scientists then would be able to walk the Martian landscape as if they were there, looking at things that were interesting, being able to get down on their knees, and because the feed from Mars is relatively high resolution, and look at things as if they were present on the planet, bringing to mind the thought of if as things advance and our robots get more advanced on Mars and our capability of being able to do telepresence better, the reason to actually put people on the planet may be vastly reduced. And with telepresence, we've got kind of those two implementations, this idea of being able to convey yourself into a headset that somebody else is wearing, which was the Sony effort, allowing a remote surgeon to assist somebody that's operating, and then using robotics, allowing somebody that's remote to actually perform the operation as if they were there. Once again, latency being somewhat of a problem when you're doing surgery, because clearly if you send a command and then the patient moves or adjusts or whatever, and the scalpel then moves, you've got a problem because whatever you're cutting isn't in the same place. Most cases when you're doing telepresence on a patient, the patient is strapped down hard. There's always a chance you might still get some movement in the patient, or somebody bumps a piece of equipment or whatever in the intervening moment. So the latency becomes increasingly important when you're working on stuff. And one of the other areas for telepresence that's opened up more recently is really being able to do maintenance. Lockheed and Boeing both use telepresence pretty heavily with regard to maintenance on aircraft because the specialists are located at their particular facilities, and the technician that's being asked to work on the product on the jet, be it commercial and military, is remote, and so the centralized resources then able to advise the technician what to do, and technician can also use that same equipment to bring up automated technology that can provide overlays, can provide menus, can provide manuals that they can look at real time while they're doing the work, all in the head-mounted display. The interesting area that never really took off but still struggling is using remote robots to attend meetings and events. The most recent implementations I've seen, they're taking something like a iPad and putting it on top of a pedestal, a motorized pedestal, and then you navigate that around. But it's had limited success. One is when it runs into a room, it tends to be a distraction for everybody else in the room. And then there are limitations to how much you can move it, how fast you can move it, and issues with regard to stairs. I have yet to see one of these robots be able to navigate stairs. They can navigate elevators, but they can't push the buttons on the elevators. So they typically need some kind of a minder or a handler for that, or a direct electronic interface, which once again is possible, but I have not yet seen implemented. There's been a lot of concern about creating those interfaces because a hacker remotely might be able to compromise those interfaces and then do some ugly things to the building or to passengers in an elevator. I'm thinking back when I was a child and would get in elevators and punch all the buttons, which one time had about 5 or 6 people chasing me down the street. They were so pissed. All the fun of youth. But you have to be concerned about security, because when you're pumping stuff into a building and you've got a robot that's got a camera and a microphone and could interact with stuff in the building, if that robot becomes compromised, then somebody else could do that, and you could have intellectual property loss issues, intellectual property theft issues, and the robot might be able to do some kind of harm. And so, if we're talking about the future, that's probably where we're really looking at in terms of the future of telepresence, is some type of robotic presence, something that will allow the remote operator to feel like they're at the remote location and be able to interact with it better. A lot of the technology that's going to be used to develop that telepresence capability and involved with kind of competing technology, which is the metaverse. Because in the metaverse, you don't necessarily need to go to the remote location. The remote location effectively comes to you, and you play around in a simulation of the remote location, or you create a location that's neutral, and everybody works in that in a collaborative way. And really, what's coming to fore for that is is computer vision, the idea of being able to really both scan and differentiate objects, and then make instant digital twins, and then be able to interact with the digital twin as if it's the real object, with physics and gravity in place. And so that allows you to do it without necessarily going to the remote location. And there, since you're not using a real robot, you're using an avatar of some kind. Anything that you do only affects the simulation, and you're not affecting the real world. And then somebody else would take what was done and convert it into actual action. And you might use a robot for that, so an AI and a robot for that at some future point. But there is a chance that as we look at telepresence, we may not be going to that remote location, but a digital twin of that location, and interacting with the twin as opposed to interacting with the actual object. You do that for security and safety reasons. You might also do it so you can experiment with things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to touch. Like, for instance, if you wanted to start mucking around inside a nuclear plant, you probably want to do that in simulation first, because having a plant shut down would be certainly damaging to your reputation, not to mention the plant. And one of the other areas with regard to telepresence and simulation, of course, is factory floor. The factories are increasingly becoming automated, and certainly, as we saw during the pandemic, this idea of being able to allow people to work on something remotely becomes incredibly important. If you can work through a Waldo or other robot while working from home and do things like assembly, or more likely inspection remotely, then that worker can remain safe in their house. They don't have to travel to work, don't have to get in close proximity with other workers who themselves may be sick, and the factory can remain in operation during something like a pandemic or a weather event, which might prevent workers from getting into that corporate facility and doing the work in person. So there's a lot of opportunity here for telepresence. Everything from exploring space to being able to explore the bottom of the ocean, or go places where humans can't go, as well as just limiting travel. For a long time, since we've been talking about telepresence, we've talked about the possibility of eliminating travel fully. Sadly, that wasn't going anywhere until the pandemic, and the pandemic has accelerated the relative technologies massively over the last couple of years. And we should be in by 2030, where we otherwise would have been probably in 2040 or 2045. So it's moving very quickly, assuming that these problems with the pandemic continue and the momentum continues. What's held back these technologies in the past is this desire for people to physically be at that remote location. And so the technology has to continue to advance to allow the people to interact with the stuff that's remote as if they were there. And we're looking at robotics. We're looking at better interfaces. A lot of the interfaces we're using right now are basically gaming controller interfaces, which really isn't acceptable to anybody that hasn't been a heavy gamer. And so the folks working on computer vision are now working on facial scanning for eye tracking, mouth tracking, and for better hand tracking, as well as gloves that provide haptic feedback. So when you're touching something, it actually feels like you're touching something. And the combination of that stuff allows the remote robot or screen or whatever to be able to emulate your facial expressions, which makes people there feel more comfortable with your presence better, allow you to wear a VR or an AR headset placing you in the location, but people remotely are seeing your eyes, not seeing your face with a headset. And then allowing you to touch and handle stuff as if it was there by using your hands, as opposed to a gaming controller. All of that's coming, but we aren't there yet. Expectations, we're going to have another pivot point probably around 2030, 2032, in that range, 2030, 2035, when all of this stuff will come together. One of the big drivers, of course, is Facebook, at least with regard to this instrumentation of the human body, is Facebook's own metaverse effort, which is capturing a massive amount of money. But we also have most of the major OEMs are looking at this, but nowhere near the level that Facebook is. So watch Facebook, and to a certain extent, watch Google, who has become interested in this on and off, but they have the attention span of a 4-year-old on sugar. So it's really looking probably at Facebook making the most advancements at this time. Another area, of course, is military, who has done a tremendous amount of work in this area through DARPA and some of the technology moving out of the military, much like the HoloLens did out of Lawrence Livermore Labs, which was DARPA adjacent. So interesting place to look at. And of course, I look forward to the moment when I never have to get on a plane again and go wherever I need to be, because frankly, I'm tired of travel.
Thank you, Professor Rao, for your excellent analysis. We have our another friend, Mr. Javier from Voice Human. So we are discussing about next-gen remote presence. So, Mr. Javier, what you want to add for today's discussion?
I heard you.
Mr. Javier, yes. Hello.
Hi. Sorry, because it's my first time here. My name is Javier Furones. I am the CEO of Voice Humans. Actually, we're working in digital humans. I don't know if you has ever heard about unique soul machines. They are one of the main business in the consumer experience based in digital humans. We work basically with a face-to-face strategy, and actually we're working in metaverse because it's a natural evolution for the future of the brands. The most important thing, I think, is how we use the process, because how you say before, is a new moment in the communication of the brands. For us, it's really important how to go to the next steps. Basically, digital humans are really easy because we work with chatbots connecting with 3D avatars, and the concept now is probably more difficult for the brands because metaverse is how you create a new dimension in the digital business. But are you in the same business, or because sorry about I introduced here and it's just for me the rest of the people. I am like an avatar. If you want to say me as a person, I put as a person. What do you prefer? Do you know this? It's a Ready Player Me.
Okay. Thank you, Professor David Smith. Very interesting point. Actually, all of you actually bringing about metaverse. It's very popular. Many peoples and organizations, even in Asia, many organizations, they are very much interested about this avatar and its contributions and metaverse contributions. So, how you want to analyze the future of uh, this remote works, especially how we can use more this metaverse and make it effective business conversations and communication.
Well, I agree with Olivier, and what Rob had said is that metaverse is a continuing evolution of this. I just popped this up there. The thing on left is what Rob was kind of talking about. I have several friends who are CEO companies who actually use this exact model. And as you can see, it doesn't do stairs. It doesn't have a hand. But as a way to begin to use it, I have some friends who their kids are homebound because of conditions they have, and they use this in the classrooms so that the kids can have a presence in the classroom and can move around the classes between classes. But the one on the right is the one I kind of wanted to show. This was my first experience to remote presence, and this was back in 1992. And this was in the Air Force, and it was the Air Force's first attempt at it. And Rob, you can see the headset wasn't a headset, but it actually was a helmet suspended from the ceiling that you stuck your head into. So going from there to the halo lenses to where we see with the future of holographic displays, it's a big change. And the holographic type displays are a natural evolution from where we are today. Um, but let me come back and answer your question a bit more. And with one of my other experiences on this, back in the mid 90s, I was doing some work with Bell Labs. And I saw one of my first experiences that totally changed my mind with this. We were up in the Bell Labs up in New Jersey. We walked into a room. It was connected to another room at one of their other remote labs by uh, three DS3 lines, which were very, very expensive, large pipes back at that time for data. And what they had is they had a conference room table built into the wall, into the projection screen, and the people on the other end, it was the same size. So if I was 6 feet on this side, they were 6 feet on the other side. But you sat down and you talked, and the audio was where it came from each individual. So there was speakers behind each screen that talked like you were hearing them too. That was one of the experiences to me that said this type of remote presence can really work, because at the end of it, one of the persons at the other end reached out to shake my hand. And guess what? I reached back, even though we were 1,000 miles apart. And that's where some of the goals are of this remote presence is try to make the people feel like you're in an inclusive environment. And that is where I think we're trying to go with this. But if you go back and understand some of the other drivers to it, is we want to, as Rob said, reduce our travel time, our travel spend. And because of that, from a corporate standpoint, we want to reduce our carbon footprint and our environmental impact. We want to use this type of technology to improve our employees' work-life balance, and particularly important for the companies, we want to use it to increase productivity. And this type of remote presence has the ability to address all those company drivers as you begin to look at it and how to go further. And also, it's extending well outside of the corporate environment with what we see. Um, but it's really there that some of the big elements of it, like we've all talked about, is the vision and the sound. But also, can we manipulate? Some of the ones as we begin to see it is we are using wired gloves, inertia sensors, other things like that, to where that the hand motions and things we do can be interpreted and used in this remote environment. We want to be able to look at freedom of movement. Uh, and the example you have on the left up there still, you really don't have any of those elements of it. It's just a way to have a remote presence without the immersive part that you begin to see with some of the other applications like Rob and Hori are talking about. The immersive part, I believe, is going to be a very important part of this as we begin to go and move more through the metaverse type of application of this type of virtual presence. And um, it's the user interacting with others is one of the keys, I think, to make this happen. And particularly in healthcare and others, it's going to be the interacting with the physical environment around them. So if I'm going back and I'm looking at the starship that's going to go to Mars, you're going to see this type of remote presence on that starship. You're going to see, I believe, from the scientists I've spoken to, remote presence with remote manipulation being done a lot to do the day-to-day flying that's going to be required for transversing from here to Mars. But even more importantly, from Mars back to the Earth, as you see what that period of time is going to be under microgravity. Some of the Mars missions, they're talking about taking 24 months to go there stay on Mars, and then return, this type of remote presence is going to be vitally important for us to move those type of missions forward. Rob gave many excellent examples there. Some of the other ones that are there is using remote presence for hazardous environments. And we're seeing those applications quite a bit right now. The remote surgery is a natural for, but the same type of remote presence can be used in education. And there is quite a bit of research being done right now in using this type of applications and others where we're combining it with advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing to create a whole new evolution of education that is classroom and beyond, and begin to see those elements come into place. I would, when you mentioned this topic in the message, Sharif, I went back in my mind, automatically went and said, where are some of the best movies I've seen, which are the science fiction decades ago, which predicted, which forecast, which became part of this. And so the goal of really a next generation remote presence is something that has been in the mindset of people for decades. And we're beginning to see, like I said earlier, the tools, the capabilities, the infrastructure, and the desire, like particularly with Rob mentioned, where things like the pandemic have dramatically speeded up the adoption of part of this technology. And then with our really manifest destiny to begin to go and explore off this planet to other planets and other places, that's just going to encourage the further acceleration of this type of technology. And it's one where I believe you're going to see, because the price points have been falling so much, you're going to see it applicable for people in not only developed countries, but developing countries to jump in and use it tremendously. We're already seeing in quite a few developing countries where the whole remote presence, metaverse approach is being used in education and manufacturing. I think that will spread too. So there's still a lot of places where even entrepreneurs can come in. With the falling of the price points, get in and develop applications that are specialized in their region, specialized on products coming from the region, and it's going to be a good market. So Sharif, that's a little bit more. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Excellent discussion. Excellent discussion. Yeah. One thing I have in mind, like when this kind of setup and this kind of technology we are using from Asia or from developing nations, I want to say, do you believe it will be very expensive for any corporation who wants to, any hospitals or any corporations want to set up this kind of remote presence utilizing this kind of technology? Like what will be the economic benefit for them, or what will be the expenses? Do you have any idea or any guideline?
Well, it depends on the technology you use. The Halo rooms. David Smith was, I think, talking about one of the Halo rooms where they take the conference table and they run it up against a projector, and it looks like your meeting is in the same room, even when it isn't. That was an HP technology that sadly failed. DreamWorks implemented it as well. It looked really good, but the fact was, after a couple of years, people stopped using it, and those rooms cost, if I remember correctly, about $200,000 to set up, and then there was a $10,000 a month support charge that went for every room, and that was untenable. At its peak, Marriott was talking about putting them in, and so you'd be able to go into one of their conference rooms and have an instant conference with somebody else looking like you're all in the same room. Never got off the ground. The people weren't willing to pay the freight to make it work, and setup still was a big problem. But that was 20 years ago. So since then, The headsets have come down in cost. The initial headsets were, as I mentioned, the $20,000, $30,000 range, depending where you are. I just picked up a high definition headset the other day for $450. That would be adequate, largely adequate to the task. And then you get the Virajo Vairjo headsets, Virajo. I think the J's silent. Headsets. They're about $3,000 if I remember correctly, but they have eye tracking, mouth tracking, and they go to 4K, flexible 4K wherever you're looking, so it keeps the traffic, the network traffic down. Because if you provide a full field of view at 4K, that's a pretty big data stream, and so you want to get the data stream down to a point where it's manageable and you can run multiple data streams. But you can set this up relatively inexpensively now, because all you need is the headset, which has cameras on it, and then some kind of a network association to connect the two headsets. Most of the companies that are bringing out the high-end aspects of this also have cloud services that go with it. But the cloud services have several $100 a month service charges connected to them, so certainly very affordable compared to what those earlier implementations were. And so it's nowhere near as expensive as it once was. And in a pinch, you could even use the lower cost headsets that have camera. You need both the camera though and the headsets, because the remote person has to see what you're doing. But so you need headset with cameras, but you can get those headsets with cameras now down and around well under $1,000 now, though the resolution isn't as good as I would like. I tend to prefer the higher resolution things for long term for if you're working for 8 hours a day with the damn things. But for short term and just to get them in place, the cost of entry is pretty low, and it's a great way to trial, just to get a sense for where the technology is, whether you can use it, and then you can scale it up to the more expensive stuff. Another company to look at, they just popped up to me last week, is a company called DataGen. They're a computer vision company, and they've fixed the problem with a number of these avatar-based solutions, where it looks like you're kind of the genie out of the 1961 Genie movie with that was it Donald O'Connor was in, where you don't have any legs. You're just kind of your avatar is floating around in this legless structure, which I found very disconcerting. And I know a lot of people that I've worked around have found disconcerting. So they'll use it if they can't travel, but they won't use it if they can. And the DataGen, which is a company that specializes, mentioned computer vision and simulation, has created near photorealistic avatars that can allow you to look like you're a person as opposed to a floating genie. Take it one step farther, at CES this last year, NVIDIA showcased an advanced avatar creation technology as well, working through their Omniverse platform, which also had legs, but you kind of and expressions, but it kind of looked like a very well done cartoon, and I still am troubled a bit by the cartoon stuff. But they also showcased a more advanced technology where they fully photorealistically created the environment that Jensen, their CEO, was in, and you couldn't tell the difference between his kitchen and the rendered kitchen, and the kitchen was rendered real time, all the way down to the studs in the walls and the wall sockets and jacks, and including the wiring behind it, just to showcase that you could tear the room apart and see how it was put together in case you needed to use it for remote maintenance or remote work, and using that level of technology is well within our capability in 5 years. And so the goal really is, when we're talking about telepresence, is to not only make it look like you're at that remote location, which we can do now, but allow other people to see you as if you were there, which is what we're currently struggling with a bit, and why we're looking at the metaverse as a possible way to solve that problem. Another thing to look at if you get a chance is go up on YouTube and look at the holoportation, which is the simulation that Microsoft did using HoloLens, and that showcased a father talking to his remote child as if he was in the room, where they used room cameras and the HoloLens to place the parent in the room with the child, and the child was able to converse with her father just as if he was there. He was able to sort of interact, couldn't really touch anything, but could move around objects and point to them in a 3D space. But in that case, they were not using rendered avatars. And so the father who was wearing the HoloLens as opposed to the child who was not looked like he was wearing that big headset, which can be somewhat disconcerting. And one of the reasons why trying to blend a computer vision technology with an actual rendering could be the end all be all for us, so that you re-render the face. And so you don't see the person with the headset on, you see the person's eyes and mouth moving the way it should be moving and in time with their words. And so you get full expressions while the remote person can still wear the headset and feel like they're there in person. Those combinations have been, well, as I say, 5 years. We should have that sorted. Another implementation that they were showcasing by 2 companies at CES was where you use high resolution displays, one step down from LED walls, which are also a possibility. I'll talk about LED walls in a second, but this is where you do one of 2 things. You take a person-sized high resolution display, you put it in portrait mode, and then the other person walks up to the display. When I first saw this was at a company event back in the late part of the 2010s, and what they did is they mounted it in a doorway, and so you'd walk up to the doorway, you would open the door, and the display filled the entire doorway, and the other person who was remote would be broadcast onto the display at full size, and so that you'd have a conversation with the person in the display as if you were talking to them across the doorway. And the reason for this is for typical remote conferencing solutions, the problem has been side conversations, allowing somebody to go someplace and have a conversation like you do in a meeting with some person sitting next to you, or somebody else in the room. You have a lunch with them or a dinner or whatever, and you get that interaction, which allows you to develop a relationship, and that relationship speaks to how it is you develop your career. And when you're remote, typically that gets lost. And so this was one of the ways they had to allow you to go to a room, open a door, have that side conversation as if you were there. Very realistic, but how often do you really talk to somebody in a doorway when you're at a meeting? And so that part of it would have to be something you train the individual to do. But there's a lot of folks focused on this, and a lot of really interesting folks doing it. I mentioned LED walls. What LED walls are being used for right now are for movie making, and what you do is you construct a room, you put the props in the room, and then the walls in the room are these massive LED displays of where you run the background, and that allows the actor to feel like they're in the action. And so, a picture of Jurassic Park, you're in something that looks like a field. You're on a set. You're not in a green screen room, and the creatures are moving all around you. It feels like you're there. You've got three, as the actor, you have, well, not 360 degrees because the cameras have one of the walls, but at least around you, things are moving around you. So instead of emoting against wireframes or actors in costumes, you're able to emote against the actual monsters. And seeing things, say a T-Rex come at you full size is certainly going to cause you to have a different reaction than having somebody in a wireframe or trying to emote against a green screen where you don't see anything. That same kind of technology could be used to create an ambient effect and allow you to be in a group meeting, say a conference, and feel like the conference was around you, the other people were around you, give you that sense of being at that remote location, be it a conference room or an open area or a sporting event, giving you a much more in-presence kind of experience. So we're doing a tremendous amount of work here, and as I'm talking, Javier is going to come after me, is showcasing that one of the avatar approaches to the same kind of problem, but once again pointing out that the goal here is to get as close to photorealism in the character as we can, and then we got to cross what is called the uncanny valley, because one of the problems we've had in the past when we try to get close but we're not close enough is you create something that is very disconcerting and doesn't look human enough. So it's probably better to have something look a little cartoony as opposed to looking too close to human before you can be photorealistic, because that closeness that's not quite there is actually worse than the cartoon character in terms of being disconcerting. It looks just a little alien, and it's just freaky. And and the uncanny valley is what we call that, and we're almost where we need to be to go full photorealism, and we can do it. It just the cost of going full photorealistic avatar real time is still beyond what most people are willing to pay. But as I say, within 5 years we should be there. We know how to do it. It's just a case of ramping the GPU technology to a point where it can actually do the rendering fully real time for a number of players in a conference like we have today, where you've got more than one person on the screen.
Thank you, Professor Rob, for your excellent explanation on that point. Mr. Javier, I think you have interesting avatar. So what you want to share with our audience, especially I want to know more about this avatar and how the young people can develop and what type of skills they need to develop this kind of avatar.
For me, it's a really complicated part of the 3D because we have to use really complicated systems of based on Blender and another system that is for the people it's difficult to create a fast 3D. For example, this is an app called Real Player Me, and it's just in real time with artificial intelligence. The question is basically that it's not perfect, but it's so easy for the new generation of Gen Z that is working in the metaverse. For example, the big companies like Soul Machines and UniQ use the hyper realistic 3D, and for me the future is something like that. It's easy 3D, no? And the question is how that technology going with the brands, because for me it's really important the digital morphopsychology. That is a process that we use to translate the criteria of the brands in our avatars. I don't know if you ever heard about morphopsychology, but this is the form of the face, the aspect that we have. And for the brands, it's really important how to translate the values of the social media brands or social media marketing in a character, in a face, in a 3D. For example, the big companies are like Neon of Samsung Neon, or for example, Unique Soul Machines are working in a realistic process, all kind of 3D 6 months. Just 6 months ago, it was with the hyper realistic, but actually for me, it's fantastic. Is the avatars, for example, are middle body, and the face is like that. We are working actually with a new system of artificial intelligence with all the movement of the face in real time. For me, it's the future of the new kind of technology. Speaking about morphopsychology and digital morphopsychology for the brands in the metaverse, it's really important how to translate the big values, the brand values to the metaverse. No, for example, we are working actually in Europe with a lot of big clients, but the question is why I have to go to the metaverse? For example, up here, why have to stay in a metaverse like the Decentraland, or a metaverse like the Sandbox, when it's impossible to drink a beer? How we are be able to convert this to the new business of the brand? How I understand the NFT process. It's a big strategy. It's a big moment as well, but it's really important that the brands go to the metaverse onboarding step by step. For me, it's a fantastic moment because the biggest technologies come from new startups around the world. It's impossible to have a team of people in the same city, in the same country. We are connecting with all kind of people. And for example, I actually am living in Spain, and but the Latin market is really difficult to as a market. It's really different. Sorry, because the question is here the people are basically afraid about the digitalization of the process. No, it's like we are natural people with Mediterranean and the rest of the values. And for example, when we work with virtual, for example, virtual YouTubers, virtual presentator, virtual social media agents. The question is why I have to put a avatar instead a human. No? It's the big question here in Latin, in Europe. For example, you see what is happening in Korea, what's happening in the rest of the world, and the artificial intelligence automation with avatars and natural. For example, we are working with digital humans, and we are be able to create a workforce AI. But it's really difficult to introduce this idea in the client's mind, no? Because it's a step by step. Actually, the question here is how we are going to uh, be able to change the paradigm. Absolutely, because the question is that we need the real things, but why we have to. Sorry.
Sorry, I think internet problem. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Professor David Smith. So, Mr. Javier.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Then I think it's really important for the future in education, for the future of consumer experience for the brands, because it's a new age for the e-commerce and the rest of the things. But for me, it's a big moment. I believe in the virtual avatar like this, simple ideas that grow the future of the humanity.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, you know already World Talent Economy Forum and School of Talent Economy. We are actually supporting many youth communities, especially in India, especially grassroots level people. We are helping 3,200 students. 22 March, we have our special episode and we will invite some of the innovators from this youth community. So what is your advice for this youth community, especially how they can develop skills for this kind of technology development? Then, what is your concluding remarks for today?
Well, Sharif, yeah, you hit a very important point, and it's something that we are finding within our companies here as well, in that the youth community is much more accepting of this type of virtual environment, this virtual presence, than those of us who are a little bit older. We are finding that in the school environment where we have piloted our social emotional learning tool with thousands of students, that they will tell the 3D conversational avatar things that they won't tell a real human. And I find that's a very interesting construct. And to the students that you're talking about, particularly in India, uh, this is an area that is ripe for solving widespread problems, and that can be used because this is more scalable than taking a teacher and trying to scale that teacher across multiple real classrooms. But even with that analogy, if we can set up a full immersive virtual presence, it will actually help us scale master teachers more in an education standpoint. You know, Sharif, you're doing a fantastic job scaling the expertise from each of your broadcasts across your region. But just think if we could be here in a 3D immersive environment, and to see Rob get up and walk and go and explain something in real time, that the people can see the different angles of it as they move, and to interact in that way. Or to have it where if I was wearing a glove, I could reach out and take hold of the joystick behind his head and use. So you're seeing that coming down the road. Education is going to be a huge area that the immersive remote presence, the whole metaverse approach is going to change. You know, I say often that education today hasn't changed much since the times of Socrates, where you stood in front of the classroom and you take my knowledge and tell it to others. This type of immersive remote presence is going to change that dynamic. It's going to change us how we begin to work there. And one last thing on that. Those of you who have listened to Sharif's broadcast have heard me say the phrase many times that geography is no longer about a point on the map. It's where you find the competencies and capabilities to do it. Now you can add to that experiences. You can now add to that with these immersive environments, the interactions that go with the competency and capability. So to me, this is a natural evolution of the concept that geography doesn't matter anymore as a way to begin to help expand this and bring new skills, new capabilities, and new experiences globally so that the student in India can be interacting with the student in Brazil, the one in Australia, the one here in Austin, Texas, and the scientists who invented the technology or made the discovery that they're talking about, no matter where they are. And in the not too distant future, they can do that to another planetary body on the moon or on Mars or wherever, as we begin to see the evolution of this grow. As Rob said earlier, when he was talking about the HP system, one of the big challenges back then was bandwidth. And the cost back then, because the bandwidth during that time was not really digital bandwidth, it was using D1, D3 circuits. And those were TDMA type circuits without being full digital. So you had all these conversions. The cost was very high. I can do more bandwidth today for $49 a month out of my home than you could with Bell Labs or these large corporations back then for really thousands and thousands of dollars per month. And so we're seeing that barrier really change. And that's going to make this available to those students in India, those students in Africa, those students wherever you want it to be, because the technology costs have been falling and the transportation costs have been falling. So we're close to the tipping point to make this really available. I kind of agree with Rob. We're about 5 years from seeing really more mass adoption, but I can tell you that the pandemic cut where I thought it was going to be in half. And with the research we're still seeing coming through the pandemic and others, and what I'm seeing at some of the things I've been judging lately. I'm a judge at this innovation judge at the South by Southwest thing coming up. Some of the things we judged this year made huge leaps from what I saw 2 years ago. So I'm really very bullish and excited about where this is going.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Rob, what you want to advise the youth community as well as what is your concluding remarks for today?
Well, there are a number of areas that are seeing a significant advancement because of the pandemic. This is one of them, and the areas that we're working the hardest on right now, the three areas that show the most promise, are the metaverse as a centralized simulation platform. We're doing a lot of things. It could allow you to. I mean, it may actually remove a lot of the need for telepresence because you'll just be going into the virtual environment and doing much of your collaboration and simulation and interaction there as it gets photorealistic. And that takes us to another area, computer vision, both from the standpoint of robots and vehicles being able to see things accurately, but also capture and re-render them accurately in their full form, and being able to render real-time photorealistic avatars, which has been one of the limitations of the avatar-based collaboration tools. And then, of course, the third area is man-machine interfaces. The man-machine interfaces need to advance quite a bit more so we can get much closer to the overall goal, which is, if you remember, that the whole holodeck that was in Star Trek Next Generation, that's the fundamental goal we're trying to get to, an ability to step into a place and have it fully feel like you were at the location it's trying to render. And so those three areas are where we have the greatest need at the moment. An adjunct would be artificial intelligence, which is going to be an overlay in all of this, because a lot of times you're going to need to interact asynchronously. And with AI, you'd be able to interact with the avatar, even if the person you're interacting with is asleep. So, for instance, I could have an avatar that's standing in for me if I wanted to sleep in this morning, and you'd be seeing him and not me, and I'd be snoring away very peacefully at the moment on what is a national holiday here. So those three areas, and I'd add AI as an adjunct, which has a much broader impact on pretty much everything we're going to be doing in the future, as areas where I'd focus. So I was in education, I wanted to get involved in this area.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Javier, so what is your concluding remarks for today? Mr. Javier.
Hi. I think we need a new kind of professionals. For example, in design, for me, is a better kind of profiles in real Unity gaming, new programmers, new cloud and data expert based in metaverse. For example, it is really difficult to find that kind of people because they are working in different kinds of business. And the question now is for us how connect that talent for go to the same place that is the metaverse. It's a great mission to train young people in the new ways of understand the new digital business. No, today we don't find the talent because it's very divided. We need profile to the guys to the design, a new forms of storytelling for brands, new social media. Basically, it's the same digital world in a new form, no? And design and a strategy, because it's just not the form. You know, it's we have to work hand in hand with different kind of talents in a.
Mr. Javier, can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. This is really great discussions, and thank you, Professor Rob, Professor David Smith, for your excellent analysis. And Mr. Javier, you bring very interesting avatar. This is very interesting for our audience.
I'm going to do the avatar for you in the next meeting. All together.
Okay.
With avatars like this, if you want.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting. I got to write it to put out the next one, all like avatars. It's a simple APIs and new very interesting because the new ways of education or the new university. The question how the people go to the I am an avatar as a concept, no? For while we are working with you in education, where you are a teacher. For me, it's fascinating of this moment, no? Yeah. But I'm going to put my face for finish this. If not, okay. Just a second.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with your government, corporations, and academy. We are launching one of the largest hydrothon in India with the help of Rotary Club. And next month, 22 March, we have one of the exclusive event with Water Ministry, with the collaboration of Water Ministry of India as well as Rotary Club of India. So hopefully this is the way that we can engage with many developing worlds, developing nations, and can contribute more. Thank you, Professor David Smith and Professor Rob, for your excellent contribution for today's dialogue. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.